Hello and welcome back to another episode of Leaders in Conversation, the DC Charter School Alliance podcast. My name is Ariel Johnson and I am the Executive Director of the DC Charter School Alliance. So today we are exploring alumni. So 30 years of the School Reform Act means 30 years of public chartering in DC. So we have a hefty number of public charter school alumni who are both walking around the city and then also doing great work nationally. Some of these people have come back and they are now school leaders. They are board members. They're engaging their community in a variety of ways. And so we have 4 tremendous leaders here with us today who are going to share their journey at their public charter school and what they're doing now in their professional lives, and also how they've given back to the public charter schools community. First, we have Xiomara Santos, who was a part of Capital City Public Charter School's very first high school graduating class. She made history again by becoming the first alumni to serve on the Board of Trustees, and she's deeply connected to the school community. Today, Xiomara also has a very big job as the Executive Director of the Government Relations at the Hispanic Association of Colleges and Universities. Next, Charley Smith, a licensed independent clinical social worker and school social worker at DC Bilingual Public Charter School. Charley is also an alum of Thurgood Marshall Academy, and she's dedicated her career to supporting students' emotional growth and well-being. We also have Marquivious Thomas, Vice Principal at KIPP DC Honor Academy. He was born and raised right here in Washington, D.C. We love a Washingtonian. Marquivious is a KIPP DC alum who taught 6th grade English before stepping into school leadership. He's a former KIPP parent himself, with his own child attending some of the same schools that he went to, and a former member of the Board of Directors. And finally, we have Dexter Hooks, a social studies teacher and Teach for America Corps member at Cesar Chavez Public Charter School, the same school he once attended. Dexter founded the Cesar Chavez Alumni Network and is passionate about equipping his students with the professional skills they need to thrive in the workforce, bridging the gap between classroom learning and career readiness. These 4 leaders are going to share their journeys from student to professional and how they're serving their communities. So let's dig in. Thank you so much for being here. I'm so excited to talk to you all today. Just to hear your stories, I've gotten to learn a little bit more about you just from your bios, but I can't wait for you all to share in your own words. So I'm going to start with Charley first. Can you just tell us a little bit about your experience at your public charter school? What was that like? Give us your overview.
Sure. I think in hindsight, Thurgood Marshall prepared me for college and who I am today. While I was in it, it was really hard to stay in it. Thurgood is a very rigorous environment, but it definitely prepared me for who I am today.
In what ways? Can you talk a bit about what were some of your favorite core memories or experiences?
My favorite memory was going to Tanzania for 2 weeks with the Indarikwa experience during my junior year of high school. A friend and I applied as a joke, and they held us to it, and we ended up going for 2 weeks, and it was a great community service trip.
I love a school that holds their students accountable for the things they say they want to do.
They did.
I love that. Well, thank you for that. I'm going to move to Dexter now. Can you talk about your experience?
Yeah, I think Cesar Chavez was a place that kind of helped shape who I would become. While also putting up with who I was at that time as well. At the time, we had 3 very unique campuses. I went to the Parkside campus, which was right across the street from my neighborhood in Ward 7, D.C. And I was one of those scholars who was fighting to be seen and heard. And I think Cesar Chavez made room for me. They recognized some of my desires early on. Granted, I went there from middle school into high school, so there were some relationships that were built. But ultimately, when I left, I understood what seeds they were planting into me each year through our public policy experiences, through challenging us academically to excel, not just in our building but across the nation. And that ultimately took me to Tennessee State University, prepared me for college, where I went on to be able to graduate 4.5 years, double major, and now I'm back now as an educator, hoping just to do the same thing in an accelerated fashion for scholars who I serve.
I love that. So 2 follow-ups. So you talked about they saw some of the desires that you had. Yeah. Can you talk about what those were?
Yeah, I mean, DC, I think our culture has been very challenging for young people and for me personally. My household was challenging, so I would bring some of those things that I was wrestling with at home into the classroom. I would challenge everything adults had to say. I was that type of kid. If you give me a lesson, I'm asking why. What's the purpose? And then why to your why. So again, I had teachers who were uniquely positioned or trained to receive that question and have an answer ready. That for me, I would say that kind of hushed a little bit of the noise well enough for me to want to read and kind of then fact check what my teacher had to say was important.
I love that. Okay, my second follow-up, I often think we don't talk enough about the diversity of majors that students can have, and I hope that we have some current students who will listen to this podcast and be inspired by all four of you. So can you talk about what you double majored in and what was that like?
Yeah, well, I'll make this note. Going to college, I felt I was prepared skill-wise, but I had no direction, like no clue what I wanted to do as far as career. My first inclination was to focus on major in education and engineering because I wanted to build a school that was awesome for young people who wanted to do education in a different way like myself. Turned out that was like two different spectrums of life. Would take a lot of years of school, and I wanted to get on the ground early as a young person. So supply chain became that middle ground where I can work with engineers and developers, but also I'd be able to communicate from all aspects of the business. So if there was a school that I wanted to be a part of, I'd know the ins and outs of teaching, but also like the importance of the student perspective as well. So similar with engineers, they are the ones who design things, but you can't create everything you design. So supply chain allowed for me to find that balance in terms of access to information, but also advocating for the things that were most important.
I love that. Thank you for sharing that. And also, just I hope if you're the young person that's going to be listening to this, stay here. You do not have to know exactly what you want to do when you go into school.
That's
You'll
right.
figure it out, and you'll try some things, and it'll be fine. I want to move over to Marquivious.
Okay.
Same question.
Yeah. KIPP DC in particular, I think really gave me some opportunities to find solace in knowing what the end goal was. At the time, I was the first college graduate from my family. So being a part of a network where to and through college is like the mantra, the motto that's represented every single day. Even on the back of our uniform shirts, they were like really catchy slogans like no finish line, the job's not done, work hard, be nice. And those became like foundational core values that just were embedded in me, and they often tied in with what my family was experiencing and the things that they wanted to make important. My mom being from South Georgia, only having a high school education, my dad being born here in Northeast DC and only having a limited high school experience, were raising three boys in the city in Southeast and Ward 8, Washington, D.C., and it was really troubling for them of like, what do we tell them? How do we get them to where we know they ultimately need to be? And a lot of times it was like the very old school upbringing of like, you go to school or you get a job. And it was very clear where they were like, hey, we actually got a kid that has the tools, is intrigued, curious, wants to learn more, and really just discovered KIPP on a whim. Like a neighbor knocked on the door and was like, hey, your kid who you're always bragging about that's so smart, they got this charter school across town that like send kids to college. You should enroll them. My mom's like, all right, cool. Like, it's not the traditional public school. She didn't know, right? Like, this is their first time having students in the area going to different schools. So it became easy. And transitioning to like the first high school that we had, KIPP DC College Prep, was amazing. And every single year getting to go on these college tours and experiencing these campuses, it became easier and clearer to see myself there in those seats, to see myself walking those campuses and daydream about being on the brochure or something crazy like, yo, I want to be this cool kid who goes off and does these great things and ultimately like sets myself up and my family for a lot of great change. And that's exactly what I did. Stayed local because I'm a huge family guy. So Bowie State University is where I ended up. Loved my time there. Probably came home too much on the weekends at first. And so they told me that they moved. But it was crazy. But, I just wanted to keep running back and being like, here's what's happening. Like, I'm learning this, I'm trying this, here are the people that I'm meeting. Like, college is awesome. And I think it was great because I got to give that as a role model to my two younger siblings, who actually they both went to Thurgood Marshall, which is a cool segue. But like, they wanted to go to college because they didn't see that for themselves because we didn't have a lot of examples of that. So really thankful for the exposure, I think, nonetheless, that I was provided.
Amazing. I love that. So I also have some follow-ups for you. So you said earlier on as you were sharing your story that you were the first in your family to get to and through.
Yeah.
KIPP was not the only public charter school across the country, but one of the first to talk about to and through. Not just to, but what does it mean to get students through college?
Sure.
And for you being the first in your family, I am also the first in my family, so I understand the pressure of that.
Yeah.
Can you talk a bit about what that means and how that has changed trajectory for yourself and for your own family?
Yeah, that's a great question. I think a lot about what it takes to get through college. I think getting in really isn't the hard part, right? It's just navigating the space once you're there. Like anyone can find a school. There are thousands and hundreds of schools to go to. It's about finding a fit. And I think at the time, KIPP DC did a great job of like helping me establish a list. So like in our college counseling course, it was like, hey, here's some match schools that we recommend based on your student profile. But then let's reach big. What are your dream schools? What are you interested in? Where do you want to go? What experiences are you looking to have? Here's some universities and colleges that match to those opportunities, right? And then the KIPP Through College program is what it was called. They like assigned you a counselor who was probably definitely overworked, who had like a whole region of kids that they would go out and visit. And so they came to the campuses. They brought us survival packages or care kits with things we need: popcorn, laundry pods, notepads, books. It might give you gift cards to help you travel to and from campus. Just like the small things that really go unnoticed that they don't really understand, and my family didn't understand, like may have been some of the barriers or challenges of day-to-day college life experience. So for you to have someone that you and your family can constantly connect with, all the way through, even set you up with career fair opportunities to learn about the careers you're interested in. Do you need to change your major? Like extra academic support all tied in together is really a benefit that I really don't think that I would have gotten anywhere else. And so I'm like really thankful for the work that I had in partnership with them, and it inspired me to why I came back today.
Thank you so much for sharing that. Also, shout out to our college counselors for getting us through, man.
They're amazing.
Yep. Same question, Xiomara.
So for me, Capital City was a unique experience in the fact that I was part of the founding class. And so I did not know what I was getting myself into. I came from traditional schools that it's like, here's a textbook, read chapters 1 through 3. We're going to have a pop quiz. These are fractions. Do you understand them? Yes or no? So it was very much just when I think of school, that's what I came from. Capital City was a very small school, so I want to say my class was maybe 30 to 40 students when we were part of that founding class. And a lot of us didn't know what we were getting ourselves into. And so Capital City wanted to make sure that we bonded, we got to know each other, at least at that first year we were there. And so when it came to one of my favorite memories, it is actually our 9th grade camping trip. For some reason, Capital City thought it was a good idea to take a bunch of city kids to a campground, take our cell phones away, sleep in cabins, no heat, but it was a unique experience in the way that it forced us to interact with each other. You know, we came from different schools where it was like 5 of us know each other from this school. There was like little cliques already, and so it forced us to, to talk to each other, to, collaborate. We would take shifts cooking as well. So that definitely one of my favorite memories. And even till this day, some of my classmates from Capital City are some of my closest friends.
I love that. Okay, so you are an alum of Capital City Public Charter Schools, and specifically a part of the first ever graduating class. Now that you serve on the board, can you talk about what that means? What does it mean to serve on a board? How do you contribute, and why did you come back to do that work?
My journey with Capital City didn't end, once I graduated. From very early on, I felt like Capital City was very invested in my success. And so, even throughout my college years, each year, Capital City was who was helping me complete my FAFSA. Capital City was the one that was helping me complete my DC tag, my DC CAP, making sure that, I was able to, go through school, that financial aid wasn't like a burden for me. And so I even remember my freshman year, there was a shooting nearby, and the college counselor from Capital City called me immediately when she saw it in the news. And she was like, I saw this on the news, are you okay? And so that's just like one example of like how deeply invested our college counselors at Capital City are with their students. I originally wanted to major in education, and then I shadowed a 6th grade classroom under the my original major. And I was like, maybe this is that exactly what I want to do. But Capital City also gave me the opportunity to also have that like hands-on experience. So during my summers when I would come back, because I was, maintain contact with Capital City, provided me opportunities to work there during seasonal opportunities. So I had the opportunity to serve as like a orientation leader for incoming freshmen, had the opportunity to serve as a dedicated student aide for students that were doing summer schools to provide me like that hands-on experience to figure out if education or being in a classroom is something I really wanted to do. And for that, I would always be thankful. And so when it came to, officially joining the board, for me, it felt like it was a no-brainer because this is a school that has invested so much in me that I felt like it was a way to pay it forward, to now invest my time into the school. As an alumni, when I always go into those meetings, the way I look at that is ensuring that our students are at the center of everything that we do. I had the opportunity to serve in the head of school search, and that really brought my journey with Capital City full circle because, this was a school that invested so much in me, and now I am investing my time, but also I help shape the future of this school for another 25 years.
And you also helped pick a phenomenal head of schools.
Oh, yes.
Yeah, we love that here. As someone that also was a former, I looked ELA 6th, 7th, 8th grade, and then am not doing that anymore and got into government affairs. How did you make that transition from, okay, maybe education is not the thing I'm going to do, to now being the executive director for government relations for a really phenomenal organization that I think probably has some real connection to your community?
Going back to Capital City has always been like a very social justice-driven school that like from very early on, I remember the school and our classes asking us like real-world questions. And so because of my background, immigration was also an issue it's an issue that I have always been very passionate about. And one of my very first projects when it came to social justice issues came from my 10th grade geometry class. There was something in geometry called proofs and logics. And so she connected that to like law and like, making a case. And so at the time when I was in 10th grade, in Arizona, there was this bill that became law. It was SB 1070. It was like a show me your papers law. And so through that geometry class, I was able to connect, math and this issue that eventually led me to create a petition that I sent to the governor of Arizona. And it was, signatures from my classmates, from teachers, from administrators at the school. And so then from there, in different classes, I continued to explore advocacy and policy and wanting to create change and how that is possible. And so once I reached senior year, we had what is called, I think is the equivalent to what a senior thesis is, but it's called our Senior Expedition Project. And I did it on the DREAM Act and DACA students. And these students are suffering consequences because, their families came to this country because they wanted better opportunities. But, after, graduating high school, they can't pursue higher education. And so from graduation, I felt like, I was in between education, like being in a classroom setting, or policy. I had declared education. We didn't have public policy as a major, but we had political science and sociology. So I ended up doing political science and then sociology as my minor. And then eventually I got an internship with LULAC, which is the League of United Latin American Citizens, a Latino civil rights organization, doing education policy. And then that's where I fully committed. It's like, okay, education policy is something I'm really passionate about. There I got to do K-12 education, and now I do higher ed. HACU is the Hispanic Association of Colleges and Universities. My role is to advocate on behalf of 615 colleges and universities that are serving 5.6 million students. And, that sounds like a lot, but not many people know what HSIs are. These are schools that are severely underfunded, also serve 37% of Pell Grant recipients and 2/3 of all Hispanic undergraduate students. And so it's a way for me to pursue change at a macro level. And then, Capital City is what grounds me, because then, I see it at a more local level with my community that I've been at for so long.
I absolutely see that through line. Thank you for sharing that just from geometry to proofs to the bill. Also, you're a good government affairs professional when you remember the bill number from however many years ago. That you're in the work, to coming back and then also being able to use that work to support a community that's probably often underserved and under-resourced. So thank you for that.
Yeah, thank you.
I'm going to turn to Charley now. So my question for you, Charley. So you believe that Thurgood Marshall Academy set you on a path, or on the path you are on today, and you are extremely passionate about the work you do as a social worker, DC Bilingual. We love DC Bilingual. Talk about your interest in student mental health and why you felt called to be a social worker, specifically in the sector.
Thurgood did set me on the path that I'm on today, but I didn't know that until I was in college at Delaware State University.
Yes, please.
Where I originally wanted to be a nurse because it's either get a job or go to school, right? And being a nurse that was the job. It was stable. You can go be a nurse anywhere, so why not do that? And then I went to class one day, and my professor had me take blood pressure manually, and that was it for me. And I went and I changed my major to public health, where I wanted to focus on maternal health, especially in minority communities. However, I took one class in the social work department, and whatever conversation we had in that class, that professor told me that I didn't want to do anything in public health. And he walked me to the dean of social work and told her that I was going to apply for the MSW program. And that was the letter of recommendation. She wrote my name down, and I started my program. But social work is such a vast field. I really needed to hone in and figure out what I wanted to do. I knew I didn't want to work with adults, and in thinking, I had to think about who supported me and how I got here. And that was Thurgood Marshall Academy. That was the first opportunity that I had to put a name to some of the feelings that I was having, and have a space to talk about it. And I thought about the kids who don't have a Miss Wilden or Mr. Williams or Miss Coco, a Miss Stewart or Miss Garcia, to help them put a name to those feelings and give them that space. And I decided that that's what I wanted to dedicate my time to. Coming back to do internships and things of that nature, which is really hard to find, especially during the pandemic, I was able to connect with some amazing social workers at Friendship Public Charter Schools who were probably very overworked and didn't have the time, but really supported me. Miss Carol and Alicia Davis are the reason, of course, that I am where I am today. And looking at where I wanted to work as a school social worker, I understood charter schools. I understand the rigor. I understand the things that are associated with them, the requirements, the standards that you're held to when you go to a charter school. People don't really talk about it. Can be heavy sometimes for kids to be held to those certain standards. And I want to be able to provide them the space to understand that every time that you get that pit in your stomach, that has a name. Or you being sad today, that also has a name, or that emotion that you're feeling has a name. So that Thurgood Marshall definitely sparked my interest in mental health by allowing me a space to understand my own.
I'm so glad you're in this space. One of the things that we advocate for at the DC Alliance is school-based mental health support, both the resources to make sure the schools can pay professionals, but then also just the tangible things that students need every day, so they can put a name to some of the feelings they have. So can you share one thing about school-based mental health support that people need to know when it comes to serving kids? I don't think we talk about this enough, both for students or for educators, frankly, because you all take the burden of so much of what our students deal with. So can you just talk about what's one thing folks should know?
I think a common misconception about me as a school social worker or school social workers in general is that we aren't mental health professionals and that we don't have the capacity to do so. As much as we are in your classrooms helping you, we have spaces for the students as well. We're able to pinpoint a lot of things that you may not see as a teacher, right? Because one thing that I realized in my matriculation is that teachers don't do it all. They can't do it all. And it's horrible that we would expect them to do so. So I think that that's the biggest thing, that we are professionals and we do hold space for students that you may not have.
I just want to remind people, I said in the introduction, licensed independent clinical social worker. Yes. These are real degrees.
Yes, ma'am.
With real licenses attached to them.
Correct.
So yes, you absolutely are a part of the mental health community, and we are so grateful for you because we don't have enough of them. We just don't have enough folks who are able to do this work. So thank you for being a part of the village for these kids.
Thank you. I think people don't realize that kids have feelings, right? And they show up at these schools every day, but you don't know what happened, how they got here, or what's happening when they go home.
That's right. Thank you for that. All right, Dexter, I'm going to come back to you. So you're doing some really important work as a teacher and alum at your alma mater. And you have been working on helping students build professional skills and translating what's in the classroom to, the workforce. What drew you back into the classroom? You talked about this a little bit earlier in your introduction, but give us some specifics.
So as a teacher, I think you mentioned it, right? There's a lot that has to be done. And you guys have mentioned, your experience in the classroom and how you recognize that. I don't think it takes more than a day to realize all of the things that you have to do in order to meet the needs of students. One of the earliest memories that I can recall is the founder of my school meeting me in the parking lot. Arms wide open, big hug. And she said, "Hey, how you doing? I'm Mrs. Salcido. This is my school. Welcome. This is your school too." Right, I was 7th grader, and I was mind blown when she said that. She said, "This is your school too," and I was like, "Wait a minute, no, my neighborhood's across the street." This school was very much so new. It actually used to be a grass field, and I was telling her about this school that she's given over to me in just such a small statement. And at that point, I realized that I had some ownership. And I think my experiences along the journey at Chavez just allowed for me to double down, as much as I tried to fight that, not wanting to be a part of school, not wanting to be a part of education. Those messages were very consistent that we need you and your voice matters. And no, not when you're an adult, but right now when you're 13, right now when you're 14 as a 9th grader and not going to class or not wanting to, right now when you have late assignments and you didn't read anything for the next class and they're telling you have to go to tutoring if you want to pass. I still was fighting against that, but those consistent messages, essentially people chasing you around the hallway, grabbing your hand and taking you to class and dropping you off to your next teacher, those were the things that helped me or shaped my view of what education actually looks like. It's not just textbook. It's not just being able to answer questions, but it's actually how we interact in the world. That's the value of education anyway. I kind of knew that I wanted to do something in that space as it relates to unlocking the potential that young people have, accelerating that process. Growing up, I too come from, DC, where we recognize there are a lot of people who wrestle with stagnation in our city, both individually, but also there's some things that happen politically or historically that have created those systems and spaces. And I learned in my household that that's not what we could afford. Right, we couldn't afford, if we wanted to live and live well, to just go about things, in terms of a regular routine. And education seemed to be the only tangible thing for me that would change that. Graduating out of Chavez, they put us in a lot of situations to be challenged, to be uncomfortable. Those overnight trips, I'm glad we weren't the only ones with that experience, but all of the 9th graders went on an overnight trip, but it was an intentional trip that we went to. It was in West Virginia. Our public policy focus for that year, freshman year, was mountaintop removal. And what we were able to do in Discovery there was have a great time, make connections. But how did what was happening in West Virginia connect to us in Washington, D.C.? Well, there was some serious effects on the community when they were blowing up mountains to be able to get to those natural resources that impacted the physical body of those communities. So we were able to see and have discussions on how we have facilities in DC, PepCo, for example, and in our areas where we see the rates of asthma being reported at higher levels than other aspects of the city, we looked at those dynamics and we were able to say and identify, hey, this is a problem. And it's not a unique problem that's only to us, but there are other communities that are diverse and may not look like ours that wrestle with the same issues. So what's the solution that can fix both? We looked at those things early on, and for me, that's what education should look like. It's not just what happens 400 years ago, but it's what's happening right now, and how do we think through and apply what we do know to the right stakeholders or shareholders to be able to bring that change. We're always pushed to find a solution. So I would say that education for me, and this is what I took going to college, existed well beyond the four walls of a classroom. Now, how would we actually train kids and develop kids is not throwing schools away completely, but reforming how they look, right? Reforming the experience of a young person from K through 12, which is why when I walked into this space, I was like, whoa, they have like the garage door wide open. And that's an amazing thing, an amazing feat to see here at this campus. But how do we do that when the infrastructure around the city isn't built for it in every school? I try my best to make sure that my classroom feels or looks nothing like a classroom. So there are days where I remove desks, days where I'll put them back in, days where I'll take chairs out, days where you're not sitting, where you come in, here's a handout, and there are some artifacts on the wall, and we're moving around. So these are the things that I knew through my own experience. These are the things that I bring into the classroom. So whether it's history, whether it's business, whether it's even through clubs like student government or debate, I'm always trying to see how we can present experiences for kids that allow for their brilliance to be developed. My class isn't just a place where you show up, I give a lecture, you get tested on the information, but I push even for the support of parents and as stakeholders in school buildings, in the school system, for our scholars to be able to like share their expert knowledge, even if it's just that lesson for today. And I think what makes it easier for scholars to share is that they've actually done something. So for me, going into business, you got to do something. You got to do everything. All right, going into supply chain and human resource management, there's a balance there in that I actually need to understand the product that I'm creating or that I'm selling, that I'm pitching, that I'm promoting, but I also need to understand the human side of that. That's why the HR aspect comes in, because there are gifts and talents and strengths and desires that people have that aren't all the same, and that helps me as a teacher. So when I show up and I see all of the different experiences that scholars come in with from the mental health side, from a skill side in terms of deficiencies and or giftedness, my job is to be able to facilitate for them to have, again, a tangible learning experience, something they can take away. And then ultimately, that's practice for them for when they get into the real world. What drew me back to education or the classroom, again, is that it was never too far away from me. In fact, I think it was like ironed into me every day I went into school. And at home, that was just reinforced. I say, you know, my dad, he didn't make it past third grade, you know, and I tell my kids now, my dad is okay with this. His story, the narrative I've written for him as a part of our family history, he was a full-time felon. And he'll tell you, he said, yeah, I went to Penn State. And he's not talking about Penn State University. He's talking about the prison industrial complex, right? So I now can see how that played out in my family, how I have the ability through my education to change that dynamic, but also I'm able to teach that to kids because we still operating in a system where, you know, there are laws in place historically that still show up that create a marginalized community of people who are incarcerated, right? That's what you're up against. So it wasn't just go graduate and get a job. It was like, hey, don't go to jail. And the only thing that I knew not to do was to go to jail. And I said, okay, well, here's this opportunity for me to do something with like my brain and education. Well, I'm going to swing on it. And again, in hindsight or retrospect, I realized that Chavez had been giving me so many at-bats to like build something, create something, do something, and then ultimately give that back to my community. So that's what I pull back into my kids.
I love that. And I really appreciate the through lines that you made from public policy and to just making sure that, both now your kids understand and have the same practical experience. I want to bring Marquivious into the conversation with a very similar question. You are now a vice principal at the same network that you went to school at. How do we get to administrator? Teaching to administrator to the great work you're doing now. And if I'm not mistaken, did you have a child that was also at KIPP at one point?
I think first, if it's all right, if I could just say, like, this is so incredible. Like, it's so cool. I think a lot of times, and not to be on a tangent, but when you are doing the things that you guys are all speaking about that seem so incredibly purposeful to each and every one of us, you can feel like you're running this race alone or just with the people within your networks. I mean, I just want to, like, say shout out to, like, what you guys are doing with this platform that really puts us all in the same space to see that there's another you in a different facet that's doing it in their own way. The end goal is the same, right? But we all have a different journey or path or through line for how we see that happening. And so, like, really just excited. I'm trying to be still over here and not mess up the audio because, like, everything I'm nodding like, yeah, right? Because these are things that I'm talking about behind closed doors and, just trying to get it out. So thank you. Thank y'all. But to answer your question, it really was all by mistake. My mom that I spoke about before is a lifelong educator. She devoted her life to, like, early childhood development. So anything from 6 weeks old all the way to 3 years old is, like, her niche, right? And I've always just watched her raise the neighborhood and raise the community. And I was fortunate to grow up in Ward 8 DC in a 2-parent household and have a loving, structured family, which I realized may have seemed like the normal for me, but wasn't for a lot of my counterparts. And friends and families would come over and stay and wouldn't want to leave our house. And I really just couldn't understand why. Like, it's nothing going on here. Why do you guys never want to go home? And it was because there was always some form of, like, teaching happening from my mom or my dad. And they also created such a safe learning environment, right? Now connecting it back to what's happening in schools where kids felt like you guys have something to offer us. And so my journey, starting off as doing that same work as my mom, transitioning over to KIPP and doing social studies, and then eventually ELA for 6th grade. So hearing you say that 6th grade was a one to watch, I absolutely resonated with that. I did 6th grade ELA for multiple years and loved every minute of it. Watching kids have reactions authentically to high-level texts that take them to new worlds and give them different experiences is, like, incredible because they're tapping into things that they only keep up in the top of their head. And every time they read a book, it relates them to a moment that they may not have found for themselves, or getting an opportunity to read about an author who expresses these ideas, and it gives them the like confidence to know someone else has these ideas, or there's a way for me to get these stories out and be told. And so while running at that, just really, really tried to get good at being a teacher. I was just kind of starting to think, like, hey, this impact is really great, and I'm really hitting about, like, 80% of the entire school complex here through the students, right? The other 20 is, like, the staff and everyone who is impacted by all of these outcomes, policies, and decisions. And I recognize that my kids are great, but at the end of the year, I'm going to pass them on to somebody else, right? What happens then? How can I take my influence and impact and my passion and spread it and make it infectious throughout the entire campus? And you can do that as a teacher, and I'm not saying that it limits it, but it was like there's got to be another opportunity. So I was fortunate enough to serve as, like, a grade level chair and department head in some of those ways. So I had influence over more people in the grade level. And I was like, let's just keep running at it. Let's get better. Let's grow. Let's impact more people. Let's support others. And naturally, before I couldn't even notice, I looked up and someone was like, you're kind of, like, already doing the job of an administrator. Why not apply? And I was like, I don't know. I don't really think I want all that responsibility. And it was like, you're doing it already. And I was just fortunate enough that KIPP DC saw value in me as being one of the alum who came back and really ran at that story. I like to tell them that I'm a product of their original mission statement of just, like, growing strong readers and sending kids to college and just changing their lives forever. And so having the opportunity now as a VP at one of our middle school campuses, which I think middle school is just, like, one of the most trying ages all throughout the city, as we're seeing with our youth, right? Like, there's so many things happening in middle school. And I try to describe it to friends or colleagues that aren't in education, I'm like, whatever your high school experience was like, it's almost like that's becoming the middle school experience because the exposure to so much that's happening, and they're able to get so much information before they can even process it and understand what's really happening. And yet things that have happened that are out of their control, from there not being sufficient resources for their day-to-day lives at home to the pandemic and all these other things that have impacted their opportunity to grow, has really stifled the experience for some of those students. And we want to find a way to kind of expedite that growth. And so no better way than to be someone who really loves literacy. Especially, I was super passionate as a Black male educator where you didn't see a lot of Black men who like did literacy instruction. And so it was really important for me to just be one of the faces that's like, hey, I really love reading. I'm this big guy that's like was a jock and played football, but I love a book. Come learn about this book. I mean, there's a book for everything we like. Just come read this book and it'll take you somewhere else and give you so much information and access that you didn't even know existed, which leads to you finding about incredible careers and opportunities that you never even knew about. And so I try to bring that to Honor Academy each and every day, and just be there for kids, be there for staff, be understanding. Try not to be a leader who is directive and more hand in hand and supportive, right? I take a lap every morning and just pop in the room and just say, hey, you need anything? How can I help you today? Right? Not, did you see my 14th email this week and why didn't you reply? Right? It's a lot of things. Our teachers, as you all have said, are being asked to do so much to try to close these gaps. And the pressure is immense. And we're all feeling it, right? But we're all doing it for the hopes that one day we can just give the kids the gracious opportunities that we've all been fortunate to have because of how much we value education. So in a nutshell, that was amazing. And it led to me enrolling my daughter, Mackenzie, into one of our ECE programs. And she flourished and did extremely well. And so I just enjoyed the camaraderie in the terms of like knowing there were a group of teachers who really cared about each and every student individually, that I was like, my kid needs that. And they'll grow up and have lifelong friends. And so I just wanted to get her involved, and she's really enjoyed that experience. And so overall, I just wanted her to see like what it did for me and have that same joy as a family that I knew that my parents had watching me go through that.
Marquivious, you have to define ECE. It's a unique program to KIPP.
Essentially what the pre-K through kindergarten realm is. So we have that there before they matriculate on to elementary and then to middle school. So most of our KIPP DC campuses have 3 schools there. So they're pre-K through 8. Within it. And
while lots of schools can have those programs, KIPP does it. KIPP's been doing it for a long time. They were kind of on the precipice. KIPP will hit its
25 years.
Yes, they will hit. I was getting there.
Oh my bad. I'm sorry.
As Marquivious just said, will hit its 25-year anniversary next year. So they have been on the precipice of doing this work for a very long time. We've only had a charter law in DC for 30 years. So congratulations to KIPP for producing wonderful alumni, but also starting them off from babies with their early childhood program as well. I'm going to stay on you because you started off your conversation with, when I asked, how you got to this administration role, you said it was a mistake. It was not a mistake. You are exactly where you are supposed to be, and you are exactly who you are supposed to be to those students. So I just needed you to hear that. But I do want to stay with you because you said, you hope that your students have the same opportunity that you all were afforded as alumni. Can you just talk about what do you, put a finer point on that, what do you want for future generations? And not just for public charter school students, but students of DC, what do you hope for them?
I really hope right now that it's about the exposure. I think each and every one of us, as they talked about these trips out of state and to get the chance to go in these policy work and to sit in these rooms where they're having conversations that aren't really the norm for students at their grade level and or age. And that doesn't happen all the time just with the curriculum that's handed into the classrooms. Those conversations are happening when you have a teacher like Dexter that's super passionate about the work that he does. He doesn't teach that to kids because that's someone told him to deliver that content. He truly cares about that, right? And I can hear that just in how you're speaking about it. And so when you have a platform and you have a community and staff that's really centered on giving students lifelong lessons and exposing them to real truths and exposing them to true passions and identities, that's the space where you cultivate a strong learner, where you cultivate a strong member of society. And it's not about always achieving, as someone said earlier, like these data points and answering questions. And I think a lot of times, because there are huge metrics that we have to hit, and because there's a lot of pressure academically and policies and whatnot, it feels as though we are, quote unquote, teaching to a test when the test should really just be life, right? Like, kids will learn those skills along the way. And I do think we have to continue to be intentional and provide intervention to help close some of those instructional gaps. That's always going to be important. But I think when I talk about the exposures is, how do I get this kid who really, really, really loves learning, who really, really is curious about outer space? Where do I take them so that they know that there's an opportunity for this young Black kid to be some type of aerospace engineer? They may not have seen that. Have you been to the Air and Space Museum here in our own city? Have you been to a college that has that as a major so they don't go to the experiences us where we're jumping through majors and trying to figure it out? Where's the support and the exposure that lets them know that there's a career for you? And if there's not, we can help you get in the room with people who can help you create it, because we want you to be innovators, not just followers in the trend of what's already existing. And the more that we're able to tap into that experience and let them know that it's not all just rooted in a completion, it's not always just rooted in turning in some of a finite lesson, but all of these are skills and information that is really transformational and should be passed on each and every day. And the learning standards and targets from what you've learned in class about logic and proofs for geometry now becomes the driving factor in the work that you do for policy and advocacy, right? And those ideas are so much bigger than the 60 to 90 minute block that you have every day in class. And so I think when I talk about exposure, it's putting things into real life terms so that students know that this information is so much bigger than the four walls within their school.
I love that. Thank you for that. Xiomara, same question.
I want students to have access to schools that view them whole, whether it's academically, culturally, etc. Just like our 9-to-5s, it's like, just because we're clocking in, that doesn't mean that who we are as individuals like stops happening at 9 o'clock. The same is for students. You have students who have immigrant parents who are affected by the ICE raids in DC. Schools in DC should acknowledge that and be prepared to support their students. And, you know, you have students who have parents who are losing access to healthcare. You have students who are losing access to housing vouchers, to food stamps. There's a lot of federal policies that are having direct impact to our students. And, you know, students deserve an environment where the school is acknowledging that and finding ways to address that. And so, you know, Capital City, for example, when it comes to student hunger, there's a pantry. We have boxes of fresh fruits, produce, etc. Come get it. If students are cold, there's jackets for students available, things like that. My biggest hope is that, you know, we move away from an environment, and, you know, I think it's still an issue wherever we are, that, you know, what's happening around the country affects all of us, and we shouldn't just say that, you know, you leave that at the door. It's with us at all times.
Yeah, this has been a really trying year for a lot of families and communities in DC. I've actually been really proud of the public charter school community for the way we've tried to come together to support students and families. A number of Know Your Rights trainings, and I don't just mean the like, here's an attorney coming in and telling you what the law is. As an attorney, I can promise you no one cares, like, because the law is not applicable in the same way right now. It's a helping our students understand that the world is different and laws may not always apply in the same way. So here's how you need to interact, and here's how you need to be thinking about your interactions with law enforcement that you might not be used to. Metropolitan Police Department is not the same as the National Guard, and helping them understand that distinction, right? I'm so proud of schools like Capital City, DC Bilingual, with their food pantries, and with some of the activation and activism they have done this year to support and wrap arms around our students whose voices have been shuttered, is the nice way of putting that. So thank you for elevating that and bringing it up, and thank you for the work that you're doing to continue to bring that to the forefront of the conversation. I don't think any of us can sit here as advocates for students and not acknowledge that this has been a really hard year, and it will continue to be difficult, and we need to make sure that we stay in it because we have a long way to go to make sure our students are protected and safe. I'm going to switch to Charley because I do want to hear your perspective on what do you want for our future generations in this city?
if you were talking to like 15 and 16-year-old Charley, I just would wanted to get out of DC. There's nothing holding me here. There's nothing positive about it. Like, I just want to go, right? And even going to somewhere like Delaware, I view Delaware as like a really big escape from everything that was happening here. But I went to school with people who were like, oh, I'm from New York, I'm from New Jersey, like, you know, and I began to question, like, why am I not proud of where I'm from? So I would like students who are matriculating right now to not view DC as something that is holding them down, but also pushing them up in a place that they can reach back to, right? Even if you do go and move to middle America, knowing that Washington, D.C. is a place that you can come back to and give back to, because if you feel the same way, then there are other students who feel the same way as well. And to be able to change the narrative about the city, about what we have to offer, right? If we look at statistics, none of us were supposed to be sitting up here telling you these stories, right? So I want them to be able to look at that and realize that, like, while I'm sitting here at Thurgood at this law day at 6:45 on a Thursday, I actually am not, no one else is afforded this opportunity, right? While I get to go talk about these policies and do all these things, no one else is afforded these opportunities. So while you don't see it right now, when you are of age, like, you'll be able to go back and say, like, oh, this was worth it. I want them to think that everything that they go through in public or charter schools is worth it.
And DC is a place to be proud of. It's a great city. It's an incredibly diverse city. It is the nation's capital. And so I hear you. I want our students to walk through, no matter where they are, whether they're in New York or LA or whatever, and be able to say, yeah, I'm from Ward 7, I'm from Ward 8 in DC, I'm from Ward 5, where we're sitting right now. This is my ward, shout out to Ward 5. Because I think it's, you know, there's no other city like DC in the world. So I hear you on that, and I hope that our students are proud to say and come back like you all have done. You could have gone anywhere after college, and you all came back and are committing yourselves to making the city what it is. I want to shift us to our last question, speed round. Dexter, I'm starting with you. We are about to go into probably one of the most challenging and difficult budget years we've had in a very long time in DC. And that is in part because of some of the federal challenges that we were just naming and talking about. And that also means that's going to impact public charter schools. It will impact our equitable funding. It will impact teacher compensation. It will impact facilities access and all these things that we work hard for every single year. What is a message that you have for policymakers in D.C.? And this is particularly, I want to just note, at the time of this podcast recording on November 11th, we will have a very interesting electoral cycle coming up next year. We know that the mayor is not going to run. We also know that we are going to have some shifts on council. It seems like everybody on council is seeking a new job that is not their current position. So that will make things very different for what we are used to in this city. So what's your message for policymakers, those who are retaining their positions, our incumbents, and those who are potentially going to come on and take over for those who are either exiting out or choosing to retire? What's your message for them about the importance of public charter schools in the city?
Yeah, no, I think we are living in a very important time, and I think I just want to speak on behalf of some of my scholars. This is what I tell them now because of their birthdays. They're becoming eligible voters. They're engaged in that conversation simply because their eligibility shall change. That status will shift for them. So when I think about the message that I'd like to send to those policymakers is to think about them, right? It's to listen well to those who you serve. That is inclusive of scholars who are sitting in classrooms right now, learning, and they're going to start applying what they learned in terms of how they want the world to be viewed, how they want to shape it. And I would suggest, or I would employ them to prepare for them. Prepare to receive that next generation of leaders, of thinkers in this space to continue to shift and shape DC to where we wanted to go, to be able to be something that when we look back and when people hear about coming to DC, they don't just think about the White House and the Capitol, but they think about the condition and the things that come out of the city for that of the people as the leaders outside of the political realm. And then also, I think, listening well to alumni. Alumni are assets to any institution. If you've trained people well, you train them well enough. This is what in my business class we talked about it. You train people well enough so that they're able to go and achieve great things, but you treat them well enough with respect that they don't want to. So I consider like the leaders of this city, those who have power anyway and influence, I'd like for them to listen well to those in which they hope to serve. That's the charter community. so that scholars can achieve a better school than what we went through, right? What we came through. So if you think we're living out the mission now, what more can we produce out of charter schools if we do have the right level of investment, so that we don't have to do things so independently? My ninth grade, I went to West Virginia, and I'm grateful for Chavez being able to take scholars further. Just last year, they went to Montgomery, Alabama on a mission trip to go and partner with the Equal Justice Initiative to really dive deep into some concepts that we talk about as it relates to the history of slavery in this country. So now when they come back to D.C., they look at that influence of politicians a little differently. They look at their families a little differently. And what we're asking for is the ability to be consistent in that, so that that's not a one-trick pony, something that happens one time for the class of 2027, and then it just disappears because of financial constraints. So listen well to those who you serve, and I think that will ultimately serve you well as a leader, similar to what we heard from some leaders in this room today.
Fantastic. Listen well and be consistent. Yeah. I love that. Marquivious.
I don't know which camera I need to say this to. Schools, a fully funded and resourced school is the number one resource that you can give to any community. The schools are the community, and the communities are the school. They need each other. They work in cohesion. It provides structure, balance, education. You're educating so much more than every child that walks through the door. You're providing resources and opportunities to grow for that family. That family grows that community. That community then impacts that ward, and that ward impacts the city. So every time you have an opportunity to provide resources to nurture and water the seeds of every single youth within the city in their very communities, is an opportunity to give back to everyone overall. So when you think about any decisions that are being made, how are you supporting the schools? Because that's the first line of defense and the major resource that the communities count on for things that they need and be supported throughout their lives.
Thank you for that. Water the seed.
Let's also look at the facts. Charter schools in DC are lifelines for thousands of family and thousands of students in DC.
48,000 of them, to be exact.
48,000. That is not going to change. And so that number itself should be proof of why are the DC charter schools need additional and equitable funding to serve the communities we're currently serving. And then, what I would also say is, for Capital City, for example, I know that 30% of students that graduate from Capital City are the first in their family to graduate high school. And that number is even higher when it comes to the first in their family to go to college. And that number is a little bit, I think it's above the national average across the United States. And so when you're investing in DC public charter schools, you're investing in, the future workers who are going to be part of our workforce, the change maker, potentially the next mayor. And so it's important that at minimum, you look at the charter schools as equal to the DC public schools.
Thank you for that. And Charley, will you please close us out?
Sure. Everybody said all of the things that I was thinking. I'm a firm believer in that strong people build strong communities. Children are people, right? So when we think about the youth of the city, a lot of people think about what we're seeing on the news and all of that, but why not think about how we can leverage charter schools to make sure that we're giving students more, right? Even during winter breaks or even during summer breaks, how can we give them more? So I urge them to think about how the policies that they're putting in place and the things that they're thinking about will affect not only the schools, but the children and the family.
Thank you so much for that. And thank you to the four of you for taking this time out of your day to join us and just fill us with a lot of wisdom and give us your story and your background. I really do hope that not only are our policymakers listening to this, but also I hope there is a student somewhere that's going to hear this and be inspired by the diverse perspectives you offer, your strong public policy content. It sounds like you might have to send some young people to intern with Xiomara.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
And just the work that you all do every single day to protect and support our students. This work does not happen without strong education advocates. This work does not happen without strong leaders in the space, strong mental health supports, and people who understand the law and the government affairs work that's necessary to create the policy conditions for our students to be successful. So I'm just really grateful to be in this space with you all, and thank you for your time today.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.